Hello, UNNI Podcast listeners, and thank you for being a very important person in the UNNI community. I have some exciting news about a product that will amplify the voices of the world's survivors. It's a mobile app called I Relate. That's I, capital R, E-L, and the number 8. I Relate is an anonymous peer-to-peer mental wellness app. Using I Relate removes the stigma and judgment from those sometimes uncomfortable conversations that we have to have when we're struggling with negative thoughts and feelings. To connect and privately chat with peers who have similar lived experiences, visit irelate.org/UNNI. That's irelate.org/UNNI. And download iRelate on your Apple or Android. This app is truly one of a kind. It has a peer network which speaks more than 50 languages. It's co-developed with Microsoft, yet still one of the only apps which doesn't sell your data or have ads. And the cost for an instant support network such as this is only 99 cents a month. And you're helping with suicide prevention on a global scale because a portion of every subscription supports this UNNI podcast. So keep surviving, UNNI community, and visit irelate.org/UNNI right now. Thank you to our listeners from around the world and survivors from all spaces and walks of life for sharing your stories responsibly. The UNNI podcast is now an affiliate of the Mental Health News Radio Network, the only podcast network in existence, serving as a beacon for mental health and wellness information, testimony, and resources. Welcome to the UNNI Podcast. I'm your host, Bianca McCall, and today our journey begins in the fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, and it takes us across the globe to connect with heroes in their own rights in the space of suicide prevention to help us reach a cure for suicide.
I had a conversation with Colin yesterday for about a half an hour before class, and we talked and we chopped it up, and about Tuesday or Monday, and what we're going to do, and what do we have to wear, like certain stuff, and where are we going to stay, and what is it going to be like, just all those pre-show jitters or just working, and I equate it to two hamsters running on the same wheel. Like, what are we doing? Yeah. Where are we going? But at the end, close to the conclusion of our conversation, I asked him a very deep question, and I broke his brain. I broke his brain because we were sitting there and we were talking, and I said, so we were talking about power and control, and we were talking about entitlement and choice, and we were talking about freedom and life, and we were talking about our lives and how they're not different. However, people, we're not different. We just are living different lives. And I asked him the question, what is the one thing? Give me two things that we as humans cannot control, and I'll pose it to you before we get going. What are two things that we as humans, we can't control?
Honestly, the first things that came to my mind when you asked it was the time of birth and the time of death. I feel like those things we can't control it. Even if you control and you try to manage from conception to the birth, you don't know what time,
go ahead.
But I don't know.
You say the beginning and the end of life as we know it.
The exact, the timestamp, I guess, is what came to my mind.
Okay. So I will say that's cool. However, that's cool.
Yeah.
However, we have C-sections,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so in essence, we can control when that new life begins. For the most part, not down to the minute or the second.
Sure.
But for the most part, if I want you to be born on a Tuesday, April 13th, between the hours of 12:30 and 1 o'clock in the afternoon,
Right.
that's when I'm going to cut my belly open and pull you out.
Right.
Okay. Now, on the opposite side of the spectrum, we have death. Okay. Now, we as people can choose to, if your elderly parent is ailing, we can stop it right now.
Sure.
If you're, if you're terminally ill, we can stop it right now. But I'll say you're half right. Because death is the only thing we cannot control as humans. We can't. We don't know when it's coming. Don't know how it's coming.
Yeah.
Don't know who it's going to affect. So that being said, people's reaction and response to death, like suicide, is absolutely just frantic.
Yeah.
Because we as humans are consumed at times with control. Everyone, I have to have control of my life. I have a very regimented schedule. I get up at this time, I go to work, I do my job, I come home, I stop at, the store, I get food, I cook dinner at a certain time, blah, 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 so on and so forth. But when you throw a monkey wrench into that cycle of normalcy, what people call normalcy, they go batshit crazy.
Yeah.
They go batshit crazy. Now, what I told Colin was, because people go batshit crazy because that narrative, our narrative, suicide survivors, and it doesn't fit their mold. Right. And this is where I broke his brain. And I said, you know why I feel okay being who I am? Because my life's narrative has changed, essentially. Okay. And I can't control it. Right.
Right.
So why don't I change my mold to fit my narrative rather than challenging my narrative and struggling with that to make it fit in my mold?
And what does that mean? What does that look like?
So what that means is you have everyone in this world has adversity, whether it's minor or major, whether it's catastrophic or it's minuscule. And at times people will fight that natural occurrence. They'll deny it, or they'll be in denial, or they'll be consumed with grief or shame or fear or anger. And those are all natural responses to change. And those are our defense mechanisms to change. Okay. For instance, if you were to fight with your significant other about, say, for the 7 millionth time in your relationship, you've left your dirty boots on the tile floor.
Never happens to me.
Right. I know.
Yeah.
So, but you have this, now she's angry or he's angry because they've asked you to change because that mold, that narrative doesn't fit their mold.
Yeah.
Your narrative is to come home, put your boots on the floor, go take a shower. Now you are fighting their mold because your narrative is different. Okay. And that's just a very simple, plain kind of explanation for it. But what it looks like for me is, sure, I've had a catastrophic loss in my life. I lost my 17-year-old daughter. She decided that her time on this earth was done, and she took her own life. And now with that comes a great deal of pain and confusion and doubt and anger and all of the entire, I want to figuratively, they used to have posters on the wall in nurses' office or in doctors' offices with smiley faces or how you feel, emotion faces.
Yeah.
So all of those things flushed through my life, right? Now I could be sad every day, and I could be sullen, and I could be angry. However, the narrative in my life has changed. So in order for me to survive and to thrive, I have to be strong enough and have the courage to be afraid enough to change my mold, to fit my new narrative.
Yeah.
You know, Father's Days sucked for the first 4 years. July 3rd is her birthday. It sucked for the first 5 years. You know, March 26th is the day she passed away. It sucked. It sucks. It's a sucky day.
Yeah.
However, this year was the first year I went to work on her day. And I worked a half a day because my body and my emotions and my brain and my heart were full. My tolerance that I thought I had built up, that level had been reached. And it's not anybody else's job or anybody else's fault. But I have to be responsible and say, hey, I'm gonna wrap this up because I can't do this right now. You know, so that was a great conversation that Colin and I had about just about life in general and how people who, you know, who are survivors of suicide are like unicorns, right? If they're normal, you know, if they can hang out and at a football game and not be a snotty, bubbly mess, they're like a unicorn. Yeah. You know? And it's like, I'm not a unicorn, dude. I just changed my mold to fit my new narrative.
Yeah. Even just the whole concept of how we define in language the word mold, you know, I mean, that implies that the, I guess, final creation or the product, right? Creation is not finished, is not yet complete or concrete, right? And so changing the mold, it seems inevitable, you know, that we would all have to go through that process. And I think the most difficult part is what happens when the change agent, you know, that forces you to become molded. What happens when that's just a really shitty thing? Like you said, like just a sucky day or a tragic, you know, event, a tragic loss. How do people, I guess, how do people find the courage and the same courage that you've had, you know, to kind of just push forward, to survive and to change your mold to fit such a tragic event? And before you answer that, because I know you're gonna, I know this is like an alley-oop, you know, and you're about to slam dunk this. But before you answer that, I want to quickly just introduce you, you know, onto the show, because I feel we're getting revved up to jump right into this. Oh,
we're gonna we're gonna beat the walls off this thing tonight.
Yeah. There's no beating around the bush. This is gonna be the realest. We're about to get the nitty gritty.
We're gonna have fun.
Yeah. And it's fun. Nitty gritty is fun for people like you and me, Marcel. I would argue
listen, it's This is like Disneyland.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
Disneyland on my birthday. I got free ride tickets. It's great.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
I think of Adele, rolling in the deep, and I feel like feeling deep, discussing, having deep processes. That's what we do. So let's get into an introduction for the listeners. Welcome back to the UNNI Podcast. Today, I have a very important guest, a very important message to come from this guest. Marcel is tuning in or linking, connecting with me from California in the United States. Marcel, for our listeners who are global, your message is getting out to multiple countries all over the world. Can you share a little bit about yourself? What makes you a survivor and an expert in the space of suicide prevention? And then can you also give us an idea of your part of the world? Why is this an important subject to come from you and to come from California, United States? What's going on right now? Oh man, there's so many. Gosh, man. Ooh, I feel like I'm with that question and introduction. I feel like I'm swimming in a bowl of like my favorite candy, and I don't know like which piece to eat first. So let's just start from the top. My name is Marcel Roston. I live in sunny, somewhat Southern California. I'm 44 years old, and I am a survivor of suicide. My 17-year-old daughter, Chloe Marie, she died by suicide on March 26th, 2014. And that was the day that my life absolutely changed. So I would not say that I'm a clinical or scholastic expert on suicide loss and surviving suicide loss, but I will tell you that I am a real world professional on the topic, and that reason being is my daughter Chloe was one of 5 children, and she is a twin. And so I am living and learning this new way of thinking and feeling and breathing and existing, not only for myself, but as a dad. I am learning how to teach my children how to deal with tragedy in their life and still remain a decent, wholesome, law-abiding, clinically sane human in this world that we live in. With everything that's going on right now, with the social injustice and the turmoil and the indecision in the world, one thing I know is constant is that I'm a survivor of suicide, and that's never going to change. Mm-hmm. So I have to live, and I choose to live, and I choose to live progressively. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean that in a political standpoint. I mean that in a literal standpoint. I'm going to school. I'm furthering my education. I'm showing my children every single day. I have 3 young boys that live in my home. I'm showing my children every day that I get up and I go to work. I put my boots on at 4:30 in the morning and I hit the street to go to work for a very great and gracious company
that it's okay. It's okay to continue. It's okay to persevere. And it hurts and it sucks. But I'll tell you that I am a firm believer in the spiritual aspect of life.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel that my Creator and those who have also survived great tragedies in their lives, my Creator only gives his hardest battles in life. And whoever's listening, if you're going through something that you would have never imagined yourself going through, or you wouldn't ever wish what you're going through on your worst enemy, and you feel like the world is just dumping its last dump truck of the day on your shoulders, I want you to know, and I hope you hear this, that my Creator only gives his hardest and toughest battles to his strongest warriors. And it could be a woman, a man, a child, an elderly person, an adolescent child, an adolescent person. And so my task is to lead by example, and not only lead those that I live with and that I come in contact with every day, but also to lead those in my community that I live around and that I deal with on a weekly basis or daily or monthly basis, from the gas station attendant that looks at me every morning at 5:00 and goes, "Another banana nut muffin and a coffee?" Yep, I'll take it.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like, well, heck, if this crazy guy can go through it and still smile and crack jokes, I know I can go through it too.
Yeah. Marcel, thank you so much for sharing, your journey and how you came to be a survivor of suicide. Will you share a little bit more about what does that role mean for you, being a man, a father, like you said, just getting up, going to work and continuing being in this position or this role of a model of how to grieve, how to heal, how to move forward. What does that mean to you? How did that come to be? Can you just share, what does that look like for you being a survivor, a lost survivor of suicide?
Oh man, I thought these questions were going to be easy. Gosh.
Never.
Okay. Wow. All right. So I'm a man. I'm 44. And because we're not on TV and people can't see me, in your mind's eye, I am 6'1". I'm 235 pounds. I have very broad shoulders and I'm a big guy. I work construction. I've done construction for 20 years. So that being said, socially and stereotypically, we're not supposed to feel or cry.
Mm-hmm.
We're not. Put some dirt on it, get going.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll answer that question in parts. The construction worker and the stereotypical hammer swinging, cigarette smoking, blue jean wearing, tank top guy that's not supposed to feel or talk about his feelings. I do, and I have. And if my feelings make other people uncomfortable, or my experiences make other people uncomfortable, I do that intentionally because I feel, and as a man in this country and in this world, we're supposed to be some impenetrable force.
Mm-hmm.
So I teach my children, my boys, It's okay to be mad. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to cry. It's okay to laugh. It's okay to scream. It's okay. It's okay to experience those things. It really is. Now, I, as a father, have to explain to my children why their sister's gone. Why did it happen, Dad? What am I supposed to do? Where do I go from here? Right?
Are these are the questions that your sons ask you?
These are the questions that I get as a dad. And the hardest thing to do is to answer a question that you don't know. I've never had to do this before. I've never had to be this person before. I've never lived with someone in my life that is a part of me genetically, emotionally, psychologically, physically, paternally. I've never had to bury one of my children. And that being said, I've never had to explain to my children how to react when that happens.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a really cool part of my story, because I have to learn. There's no ceiling to knowledge. There's no ceiling to intellect in this world. It's infinite, like numbers. The secret and the challenge that I face every day is remaining teachable. Because as my children say, when I try to direct them or teach them, oh, I know. And I've caught myself saying, oh, I know.
Yeah.
I know. Okay. The most humbling thing in the world is to be able to tell your children, look them in the eyes with tears running down your face and say, I don't know. But we together are going to figure this out. And we are going to make it through this, because we are not going to give up. We're not. And the question soon follows, well, my sister gave up, right? That's the stereotypical social stigma behind suicide. It's a quitter's disease.
Right.
Oh, you couldn't handle it. You're too soft. Oh, the world got too hard. Man, it's not true. Sometimes people that have emotional or psychological, whether it be chemical imbalance in their brain or a misdiagnosis or whatever the case may be, sometimes they choose to end their pain not because they've had enough, but because they don't want it to ever come back. Because they see through their own eyes the confusion that they're experiencing in their mind and in their body, the effect and the toll that it takes on those around them. And they have clarity of the emotional distress that they put upon other people. And they can't form the words to tell them what's wrong. Because people say all the time, I know you've heard this before, Bianca. Hey, what's wrong? What's the natural response to that?
Nothing. I'm fine.
Yeah, nothing. I'm good. I'm good. Right? And sometimes we say nothing because we have nothing nice to say. Because the fear of being misunderstood, okay, being devalued is immense. it's immense to people who are struggling. I know there's millions of men and women right now that are going through, and children too, that are going through stuff with COVID-19, and we've never had to do this before.
Right.
Okay. And they don't know how to cope with it. And that compounded with other life stuff can really, really mess you up. You know?
You bring up, this is just such an important piece of the survivor's journey, is for others to understand, and not others like us and them and people that just don't understand, but others that are involved in this suicidality, right? As family members, as community members, we're all connected. We're all involved in even just one person's experience of suicidality. And it's so important for all involved to understand that the stigma that suicide is a selfish disease, is a quitter's disease, could not be further from the truth when you explain it the way that you just did, Marcel, in that there's so much thought that goes into other people being comfortable, other people being happy, other people being delivered of the burden of having to deal with, our internal crisis. There's so much thought that goes into someone else's satisfaction and happiness and what other people consider to be normal and popular or appropriate. It couldn't be further from the truth that this is a selfish act, within that context. I think it's an important point, that communities across the world begin to understand, begin to, change the narrative, as you put it, change the language behind our survivors, and instead of shaming and dehumanizing or devaluing.
Right.
There's got to be some level of understanding, of what that person's going through. Now, you mentioned, so your sons came to you and asked you these questions of why and what are we going to do? And you were honest and you said, I don't know, but we are going to figure it out together. Mm-hmm. How much of that was you communicating that to yourself, convincing yourself of this?
Oh, that was 100%. That was 100%. Because as a parent, I'll tell you, boy, let me tell you, I've talked to parents and parents with one child, or parents with two children, or parents with 6 children, or, number of kids, whatever, parents. And I've shared my story on local media, and I've shared my story in different forums, locally. And, the number one response is, if that happened to me, I would just die. I don't know how I don't know how I could do it.
Yeah.
Right. Well, here's the shocker. Neither did I. It's not like I had this on my vision board. It was like, sweet, in 2014, I'm going to change my whole life, and I'm going to lose a child and, become this, prolific, humbled person, in 1996, when they were born, I was already saving for their weddings because they're expensive, and woo, girls, boy, let me tell you.
Yeah.
you give boys a bag of chips and a pizza and they're solid. Girls need 7 pairs of shoes for 4 hours of events. It's crazy to me. So, when I said that to my children, I was speaking to myself through them, because your children, our children, all of our children, okay, they look to us to show them things that they may or may not encounter in life. And it just so happens that my children have experienced at a very young age a traumatic event. And shockingly enough, and contrary to popular belief, they don't have a third arm sticking out their forehead, or they don't, isolate, or they're not weird.
Right.
They are regular kids who have experienced something traumatic and are learning how to live life every single day that they wake up, just like their dad. And if this didn't happen, we would still be doing the same thing. It's just like, it's like baking a cake the same way for 15 years, and then someone telling you, hey, have you ever put this in your cake? And you try it, and you kind of like, you're a little weirded out at first. Yep. You're uncomfortable. It's unsettling to you because you have this routine. You have this normalcy. Your narrative is the same and has been the same. And then when someone introduces a new element to your narrative, you think to yourself, there's no room in my mold for extra new stuff.
Right.
It takes a lot of courage to learn and to say, I don't know. So you have to learn every day. I learn every day. There's times when I don't want to go to work. Now, do I desire, or am I unable? Those are things that I think about on a daily basis, because my life has changed and it's broken down to the simplest of forms. And I have to trust myself, and I have to speak to somebody and tell that person how I feel. And that's not the hard part. That's not the hard part. Because I think everybody in this country, I've never been out of the country, so I don't know about the world, but everybody in this country has yelled at somebody from their car window, right? Everybody.
I may have.
Everybody has said,
depends who's asking.
Could you drive a little faster? And they've done it with no fear. You know why? Because they're in their car and their windows are down and their doors are locked and their seatbelts on and they're safe, right? Yeah. It's their bubble. The hardest part is getting out of your bubble and telling somebody else, I do not feel okay within myself to do what you have asked me to do today. And that's not the scary part. The scary part is what their response is going to be.
Right.
Okay? It doesn't matter what their response is, because you're not telling them that for their response. You're telling them that for your health and for your well-being. And whether they understand it or not, it's not up to you. But you have to speak up for yourself. You have to say, I don't feel good today. I'm really upset. I don't feel safe in my skin. I feel like my world is falling apart. And if you can't tell your significant other or your neighbor or your parent or your guidance counselor or the kids you go to school with, don't ever stop telling someone, because someone is going to stop and say, okay, let's figure it out.
Right. Marcel, will you help me and our audience to understand kind of day in the life of a survivor within the context of you are surviving and having to accept the world's perception of your experience and of your daughter's journey and experience, and you know firsthand that the world is wrong, that Chloe was not weak, that Chloe was not a quitter, right?
Mm-hmm.
How can you help give us any type of insight to what that is like living as a survivor and fighting against all of these false perceptions about suicide?
Yes, and I'm so happy that you asked this question, because this question it gives me goosebumps. It makes my fingernails grow. I love it. I absolutely love this question, and I will tell you why. Because suicide, nobody likes to talk about it. They don't. We're not talking about that. Not on a serious level.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to joke about it. I'm so overwhelmed I could just blow my brains out. If you ask me that one more time, I'm going to go jump out a window.
Right.
Right? And then you get the guys or the girls that say just that. Suicide's a quitter's disease. And you go, really? Tell me why. And they tell you why. And you go, okay, let me tell you my story. Now, you tell them your story and they see you for who you are. So the world is wrong in their perception of suicide and suicide loss and survivors. And that's okay. And the reason that it's okay is because nobody talks about it. I'm the guy that talks about it. But I'm also the guy that will have a water balloon fight at 27 degrees in the middle of the winter. I'm also the guy that will put your newborn baby to sleep that's cranky in your arms. I'm also the guy that will pull you out of a burning car. I'm also the guy who will tell the kids in the neighborhood, hey, don't do that. You're safe to come hang out in my yard as long as your parents know. So for all intents and purposes, I'm that normal guy, which means suicide is normal. It's horrible. It's horrible, but it's a norm now. It's prevalent. It's in, it doesn't just happen to inner city kids, or it doesn't just happen to stockbrokers. It doesn't just happen to drug addicts. It doesn't just happen to people who are in the LGBT community. It doesn't. It happens to everyone. It doesn't matter your color of your skin or the quality of your credit score. It does not care. So I bring that to everyone. I bring it to people who sit in boardrooms and make executive decisions all day. I bring it to homeless people who are on their last, winging a prayer. And by sharing my story and remaining that normal guy that will sit down and yuck it up with you. And I'll also teach you electrical theory, and I'll teach you how to build things. I begin to dispel the stigma because I'm 6'1" and I'm 235 pounds and I have a shaved head and a couple of dimples on my face and tattoos, and I'm not your average everyday poster child for Calvin Klein. I'm more of a Dunkin' Donuts kind of guy. So the world is wrong, and it's my job, one person at a time, one event at a time, one conversation at a time, not to prove the world wrong. It's not my job. The world's way bigger than I am. My job is to enlighten and to teach and to share and not be selfish with my experience. Because my experiences may resonate with somebody that's listening in right now. I may be telling the exact same story of someone who is in Liverpool, who is in Qatar, who is in Quebec, Canada. I could be telling my neighbor's story right now. I could be telling your sister's story, your brothers, your mothers, your nieces, your daughters, your sons. So the more that we speak about it, the more commonality we find within each other. And it no longer becomes a quitter's disease. You're no longer giving up. You're now standing up and you're speaking out for help. You're not weak. You're not vulnerable. You're not a quitter. You just don't know. And the only way to find out or learn something that you don't know is to become inquisitive and to ask questions and to share, because knowledge is given just like knowledge is taken. It's either through written word or spoken word or heard word. So I don't want to prove the world wrong. What I want to do is I want to stop someone from living with what I live with every day. That's the loss. That's the doubt. That's the grief and the guilt. Those are the things that I want to alleviate from other people, not because I don't think they can handle it or they're not strong enough. Simply because this sucks, man. This sucks.
Tell me, Marcel, I can't imagine, and I've told you this recently, as well as you were sharing some content with me, and images of you and Chloe together. And I told you, I said, I don't have the words. This isn't one of those, I'm sorry for your loss and we move forward. I didn't have the words. And the reason why I didn't have those words is and what I shared with you is that in the image specifically with you and Chloe, and you had mentioned to me that this was one of the final images that you guys had taken together, final pictures you had taken together.
The last photo that we had together. Yep. The last selfie. Yep. And
it was so powerful because I saw so much life,
right?
In her eyes and in yours.
Yep.
And to me, I didn't have the words because I couldn't wrap my own mind around you and your family and Chloe experiencing what she did in those moments, where there was a complete loss of life, Mm-hmm. So when you say it sucks, I hear you and the listeners, they hear you and yeah, it sucks. I mean, but that is just really the tip of the iceberg, the surface of what it really feels like to experience that type of loss. And I suppose what I'm getting at is I want everybody who's hearing this right now to understand that it's okay to say that, to feel that, it's okay to feel deeply in this circumstance and not because it's comfortable to say, hey, it sucks. It's comfortable for somebody to hear, hey, how's your day going? Well, it kind of sucks, but I'm okay. That's comfortable.
That's the number one response to I'm not getting into it.
Yeah.
I don't want to go there.
so I guess in kind of a roundabout way, I've arrived at, I'm not going to let you off the hook to say,
I hate you so much right now.
I'm not going to let you off the hook to say it sucks, because there are people in this world that you're absolutely right. This could be their sister's story, their brothers, their somebody they know. And the problem is that they don't even know it. They don't know that it's that person's story, because they're not talking about it, because everybody's comfortable, or they're trying to be comfortable.
Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. All right. Here it is. All right. So, yes, it sucks. Sucks super bad. And when I say it sucks super bad, that is an all-encompassing sucks. Right? I'll tell you, I still have a sweatshirt that my daughter wore when she was 11 in my closet. I have her picture by my bedside. That's the second thing I see every morning when I wake up. The first thing I see is the ceiling, because I open my eyes.
Yep.
Man, how does it feel? Okay. A piece of me is gone. And that sucks. It hurts every single day. There are days when I drive by, McDonald's, and I remember the last time we were at McDonald's, and it hurts. It hurts really bad. But I will tell you this. Okay, I'm a parent, and I have children, and I was also a child. Shockingly enough, some people will tell you I'm still a child. So when I was a child, I would ask my mother or my father or an adult or someone older than me a question, right? And they would say, don't worry about it. Or I would tell someone about my day at school, and I'd say, I had a rough day at school. Well, what happened? Well, I got bullied, or people made fun of me because I'm biracial and I have an afro and blue eyes and light brown skin. And the automatic response was, oh man, when I went to school in the 70s, blah, blah, blah. Right? You don't know what hard is. And the truth of the matter is, we as adults and as parents now, in the time we're living in, we don't know how hard it is to be a child. Right?
Right.
So I tell people, and I practice this, when I say it sucks, you pulled one on me. When I say it sucks, you ask me why or how. And that's about remaining teachable, because we don't know everything as parents. We don't know everything as adults. And sometimes the greatest lesson you can teach your kids is that you care. And how can you show them? Not by buying them Xboxes all the time, or letting them go, to Dave & Buster's or an arcade, or giving them a credit card or a cell phone, but letting them teach you what their day is like. Letting them teach you what sucks means to them. Letting them teach you their difficulties, emotional difficulties, psychological difficulties, scholastic difficulties, and not judging them on their fortitude or their strength, but showing them compassion and remaining open and teachable, because you're vulnerable, and that's something that parents aren't supposed to be, is vulnerable.
Right.
So that being said, my everyday is I'm vulnerable. My everyday is I'm vulnerable. I'm vulnerable to songs on the radio, You Are Not Alone by Michael Jackson makes me cry every single time I hear it, because I was driving with my daughters and taking them back to foster care. And that song came on the radio, and I sang that to my daughters. And I cry every time I hear it, because every time I hear it, that memory comes into my mind. Just like the Kelly Clarkson song, Since You've Been Gone. That song I sang at the top, screamed at the top of my lungs with my daughters at 11 years old, when they were going with me to a summer concert where she was going to be performing. And to see a gigantic, well-built man screaming the lyrics to Kelly Clarkson in a car full of 11-year-old girls is kind of comical. But it sucks, because one of my buddies is gone, However, the lessons that she taught me and the things that she said stay with me. And those are the things that keep me from going to that dark, dark, dark place. I think of my daughter when I'm sad, and I smile because I remember her smile, So when I say that it sucks, it's like a washing machine that changes cycles. First you're in the soak, then you're in the tussle. You get shook around a little bit, and the dirt gets taken off the clothes, and then all the water leaves. And then the spin cycle comes, right? And then you sit in that spin cycle, and you're stuck to the walls of the washing machine until someone opens the door, and they take a piece of clothing out, and they shake it out. And then all of your wrinkles are gone, and all of your stresses are gone, and you're clean, and you're cleaner than you were when you got into that washing machine of life.
Sure.
Okay. And so after you go through the dryer, you have an opportunity to be worn again. And hopefully this time you won't get ketchup on your shirt, or you won't spill a drink on your new shoes. So what I mean by that is there's opportunities every day to change. There's opportunities every single day to make it just 1 minute better than yesterday. I'm not going to be, I'm never going to be the same dad I was 7 years ago. Never. I'm going to be a different dad. Am I going to be a better dad? That's up for debate. I'm going to be a different dad, though. And I'm going to be cognizant of my feelings of grief. And I'm going to, I'm going to have my outbursts of anger. And they're going to be misdirected at my kids sometimes. Or they might be misdirected at a significant other. The difference is I'm going to come back to those people, and I'm going to say, hey, I'm sorry this is why I reacted the way that I did. And it's not okay. But I'm going to tell you that I'm sorry, and I'm going to make amends for my actions. I don't have a lot of guilt around my daughter passing because I had an opportunity to sit with her one-on-one. It was actually the day we took our last selfie. And as a parent, coming from my background and how I grew up, I asked my daughter quite simply, tell me everything in your life up to this point that you're angry about with me, that you're angry at me for, or things you don't understand. And we had a conversation. It was about a couple hours. And at the conclusion of the conversation, I apologized to my daughter. And what that apology did was that freed my daughter from all of the anger that she had. And it gave all of those things back to me because I was in a space where I could accept them. And I could really think about her perspective and her point of view and how it must have been from a child's eye. And then I took a look at them and I accepted responsibility for my part, and then I left them alone. I don't go back to, 12 years ago or 15 years ago and beat myself up about a decision that I made with my daughter. I can't change the past. I can learn from it and I can grow, because those situations have arisen with my other children. And I draw from the experience that I had with my daughter, and I challenge myself to change the way I listen, change the way I hear, change the way I respond, and change the way I react. The times that I share my story and my strength and experience and hope, if I can save one person, man, woman, or child, from me as a survivor of suicide, a man who buried his daughter, who was my absolute twin, it makes the pain of losing her a little bit less. It makes me smile a little bit more genuinely. It makes me feel okay to feel okay. I didn't laugh after my daughter passed. I didn't laugh for about 4 years. And I know what you're thinking. Come on, 4 years? No laughter? You must have heard a good joke. You must have seen a funny movie. You've had plenty of birthdays. I'm sure that your friends or your parents or your kids have given you stupid gifts that make you laugh. Yeah, they have. But I haven't. Until one night I went to a comedy show and I laughed for the first time. And after the show, I met the comedian and I shook his hand and I shared my story with him. And I said, "You're the first person in 4 years that has brought joy outwardly."
Thank you all so much for your time today. I'm your host, Bianca McCall. Remember, connect, create, be constructive. Help me and the many others doing amazing things in the space of suicide prevention, and reach in to give permission to those in crisis to reach out. Please, I welcome for you to share your thoughts, your feelings, your efforts, or the efforts of others in your communities with me. Please, you can find me on YouTube, on IG, on Facebook, under my agency's name, Desert Rose Counseling Group, or you can find me on LinkedIn under my name, Bianca McCall. We also have a website where we'll be posting our podcasts and updates on information. And until next time, stay safe, be well, be heroes.